Welcome to another edition of the Magic Ladies Podcast, a podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a lot of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. So today, we have a lot of stuff on the docket. We're going to try to get into it as smoothly as humanly possible. We're focusing on NBA trade rumors. We're focusing on the first quarter of the Orlando Magic season, getting back into the fray of things, going up against the Denver Nuggets tonight as of this recording. And then we are going to kind of delve even deeper into what this next 30 days or so is going to look like as things around the trade market start to really formulate themselves. Two of the biggest days leading up to the NBA trade deadline are December 15th and January 15th. We're going to focus on December 15th first, and as we approach January 15th, we're going to have a bit of a mini series over the next 30 days that kind of leads us towards the understanding of what kind of guys are available, what kind of guys would be interesting for the Orlando Magic to at least take a look at. I think in this world of the NBA where we hear Giannis Antetokounmpo could potentially be moved, Luka Doncic was traded under everybody's nose in a situation where nobody thought that was possible. Years back, Tyrese Halliburton, who no one thought was even available from the Kings, ended up being moved for one of the most favorable packages, one of the quote-unquote most win-win at the time packages that we've seen. I think the idea of thinking that anybody is off the table unless it's financially induced is completely out of the question when it comes to the NBA. That doesn't mean that I believe that every single person that I list throughout this month is going to be someone the Orlando Magic are going to be able to legitimately snag away from their team, whether it's due to availability or things of that nature. But everybody that I end up bringing up on this or throughout this series is going to be somebody that I think could be an interesting get for the Orlando Magic that I think at least has a chance of being pried away, whether it's to be on the Magic or to end up on a different roster, quite frankly. But I'll get into that a little bit later on when I get closer to the end of the show. I don't want to spoil that too much. Let's focus on understanding December 15th. So we've had officially, about 24 to 48 hours to kind of get a full understanding of the magnitude of what December 15th is as far as the NBA trade deadline checkpoints are concerned. More formally, I'm going to read what exactly took place earlier this week, which is starting on December 15th, the overwhelming majority of 2025 free agent signings become trade eligible. This year, that means a total of 77 players, or about 17% of the 450 roster spots around the league, can technically hit the market starting as of earlier this week. So, I have a list from CBS Sports, and I will be utilizing this list very, very frequently over the next month. Like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a mini series that I'll explain closer to the end of the episode, but we are going to lean very heavily into this CBS article, utilizing the names that are on this list and essentially connecting them to the Orlando Magic in any way humanly possible, right? That's whether that's a guy that I think should be an Orlando Magic target, somebody who has been in conversations to land on a potential Orlando Magic adversary, whether that be the New York Knicks are in high conversations for this player, the Miami Heat are in high conversations for this player, the Cleveland Cavaliers could poach such and such a way, right? If it's anything that involves either a player that I would love to see on the Orlando Magic, a player that I think could land on an Eastern Conference team that could then affect the Orlando Magic, or even a archetype of player that I think would be interesting, where even if the Orlando Magic are not in the mix for that player, that style of player could be an interesting get for the Orlando Magic. These are all things that we are going to discuss throughout that series. So just keep that in mind. Again, the CBS Sports article is written by Sam Quinn. NBA trade candidates, who can get traded on December 15th, who has to wait, and who can't be moved at all. Again, keep that, bookmarked if you want to follow along with the series bar for bar. These players will be referenced heavily over the course of the next 30 days. Specifically for the Orlando Magic, though, I have the list of the quote-unquote trade-eligible players that the Magic could move if they were to try to make some kind of splash move during the season. the upcoming free agents who might likely be moved due to the fact that simply there might not be a contract extension ahead, or there might be value in them being an expiring contract. That would be Jet Howard at $5.5 million and Tyus Jones at $7 million. As far as rookie scale contracts are concerned, these are guys who are going to become restricted free agents within the next year or two, potentially three, is Anthony Black, Tristan Da Silva, and Jace Richardson. For context, Anthony Black makes almost $8 million. Tristan Da Silva and Jace Richardson make less than $4 million. So they would likely be aggregated contracts as well, similar to the free agents in Jet Howard and Tyus Jones, who, with their contracts being so low in value, would likely be sweeteners as far as a trade is concerned if it involved a high leverage, high salary player. Now, the sizable contracts that could likely be the bud of any real initial trade would be Franz Wagner at $38.7 million, even though I believe that he's untouchable. Desmond Bane at $36.7 million, even though I believe that he is relatively untouchable at the moment. Jalen Suggs at $35 million. Of this list, there's two players who I think are the most likely to be moved or have the most value on the market for the Orlando Magic to land a particular upgrade. Jalen Suggs, despite how much I love him, would be one of them because of the fact that he has a sizable contract of $35 million, which means that you would not have to pair very much with him in order to be able to move him for a significant value in return. Also, Jonathan Isaac at $15 million. Again, if you were to aggregate a Jonathan Isaac and a Tyus Jones, a Jonathan Isaac and a Jet Howard, a Jonathan Isaac, and even though I don't love this as much, an Anthony Black or a Jace Richardson, just from a salary perspective, if you had to aggregate a guy or two, the anchor of that trade package would probably be Jonathan Isaac's $15 million, and then someone like a Tyus Jones $7 million now gets you up to, what's that, $22 million. Or if you're at an Anthony Black, that gets you to nearly $23 million. Or if you're Jace Richardson or a Jet Howard, where you make around anywhere between $3 to $5 million, maybe you have to do Jonathan Isaac, one of those two players, and a future first round pick / second round pick in order to make a trade work, right? So that's just, again, I'm just laying out the details of the potential players that could be traded just based off of eligibility here. Wendell Carter Jr. as well at $10.9 million, also has a team option in 2028, could be a player that's looked at. And last but not least is Goga Batadze at $8.3 million. He becomes an unrestricted free agent, not this upcoming summer, but the following summer after. So he has about one more full season after this with the Orlando Magic before he could become an unrestricted free agent. Of everybody that we named, only Anthony Black and Goga Batadze are up for a contract extension in the foreseeable future, meaning within the next season or two. Jet Howard would be looking for an extension as well. And then Tyus Jones, the likelihood of him being extended is probably pretty low. Especially if he were to be extended, it would be in the form of just another one contract rental, more than likely, right? So those are the names. Now, two names that I did not mention are Paolo Banchero, who is essentially unable to be traded due to the heftiness of where his rookie contract extension is associated. The better way to read it, I'll read this section right here. It says, while they are eligible to be traded, we need to cover 2022 first-round picks who signed rookie extensions over the summer. Those extensions gave them poison pill provisions. This means that for their original teams, they count as actual 2025-26 salary as outgoing money. However, their new team, solely for salary matching purposes in the trade and not for salary cap, luxury tax, or apron concerns, would need to count that player as the average salary for every year he is under contract on both the extension and the existing season. Because for those who are not aware, Paolo Banchero currently is making around about $15 million, similar to Jonathan Isaac, on his current rookie deal, but his contract extension bumps him up to around about $45 million or so on average. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration, because now any team that would want to trade for Paolo Banchero, for example, would have to factor in about the averages between that $15 million and that $45 million or so that's stacked up into his rookie contract extension he signed over the summer. It says there's nothing preventing these contracts from being traded other than the difficulty of matching salary for many teams under the more restrictive 2023 CBA. That math can get very tricky for teams navigating the aprons. Paolo Banchero is at the top of that list, and basically what that means is that Paolo is one of those players that likely would have to be a star-for-star trade swap, or Paolo Banchero would be the singular trade piece for the Orlando Magic in exchange for its own version of a haul. The same way I mentioned Jonathan Isaac, Jet Howard, and a pick. It would or a multitude of picks for the Orlando Magic. It would have to be a pick because they don't have a lot of their future first round capital available. But in this case, if you were to trade for Apollo, if it's not a star for star trade, it would likely have to be some version of that kind of trade. One high value salary filler, one young prospect player that could be a bit of a sweetener that also adds to the salary, and then some kind of future draft capital as filler to kind of make the whole thing make sense financially, right? So he's number one. And then number two is someone who in a sense is a bit untouchable, but for a more unique reason. And that is Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner, in retrospect, on his $5 million, essentially has a little bit of like a no trade clause, in a sense, attached to his 1 year re-up. So that is something to keep into consideration. I think the best way to explain it is based off of this section right here, which says, however, a player can get the right to veto a trade under certain contractual conditions. Those are players who re-signed with their original team on 1 year deals or 2 year deals, as Mo Wagner did in the second season as an option. As of the 2023 CBA, players can waive these implicit no trade clauses upon signing their contracts, and many do so either to earn more favorable contractual terms or because their team simply won't re-sign them otherwise. Of the 15 players that are eligible to do so, Mo Wagner is on that list alongside players like a James Harden, Fred VanVleet, Quentin Grimes, Cam Thomas, to name a few. Kyle Lowry is another one that's very notable as well within that list. So Mo Wagner essentially has a bit of a no trade clause. You could say that operates in two ways. One, you're the brother of one of the star players on the team. The likelihood that they'll move you without him being somewhere in on the conversation is probably slim to none. Very similar to how I feel like if Giannis is traded, Thanasis is likely very close behind him. I know Thanasis has played on teams without Giannis before. He played on the New York Knicks without Giannis and so on and so forth. But I think at this stage in his career, those two are likely a package deal of sorts. I think that Mo Wagner and Franz are somewhat similar in a sense, right? So there's that semblance of it. But then there's the other side of it, which is also that this team quite literally is up against it as far as again the quote unquote no trade clause or the ability to veto that Wagner has, which means that unless he sees a trade that like he sees fit, he's likely not going to allow a trade to go through just because that's something that he has access to. And the likelihood is that they're not going to move him, right? He's likely to come back at the top of the new year, and I think he's going to be a good locker room presence for the team. He's going to be a good, reassurance for someone like Franz in the locker room, and it'll help a lot of things make sense. So all of that within the Orlando Magic context means that a lot of guys are eligible to be moved on the Orlando Magic. Again, I believe in this version of the NBA, there's no version of a far-fetched trade anymore. When you see guys like Luka Doncic being traded for Anthony Davis, or you hear about Giannis Antetokounmpo being traded for packages that may not even have a star attached to them, when you hear about guys like a LeBron James at one point coming into the season, being a player that was discussed as potentially being on the trade block, despite the likelihood of that being slim to none. These are all things that have now opened eyes to the to NBA fans, where it's no longer the question of whether or not a trade is realistic or not. We're as close to an NBA 2K My League trade scenario as you can get as far as the modern NBA is concerned. There's no untouchables. I believe in this version of the NBA. I believe teams have their guys that they are hinged to, right? For example, I believe the Lakers would never move Luka now that they were able to pull off one of the biggest fleeces of the century. I believe that Victor Wembanyama is completely untouchable as far as the San Antonio Spurs are concerned. I believe that the Dallas Mavericks, as trying to make up for the Luka Doncic trade, view Cooper Flag not only as a linchpin because he's the reigning number one overall pick, but because he's somebody that I think represents their transition away from Luka Doncic in the best way possible as far as having a blue chip guy that's ready made to take that mantle, right? There are team centric guys that are quote unquote untouchable, but I also believe there's no version of a deal that is too much or too little for a guy in today's NBA with the CBA constructed the way it is, the focus on depth being as important as it's ever been, and the influence that draft picks and draft capital have on teams' decisions to make moves, a la an Oklahoma City Thunder who now control the NBA draft for the better part of the next 3 to 5 years because of moves they've made in the past that have allowed them to not only accumulate and develop talent, but also control the ability for other teams around the league to accumulate and develop talent as well, right? So this is going to be a really interesting next month or two as far as our road to the NBA trade deadline, so to speak. And the Orlando Magic, although I believe are going to be very inactive, I feel like they're going to be very quiet. I also believe that the Orlando Magic are a team that we always view as being like this sleeper hanging in the bushes. And it started with something like the Desmond Bane trade. I don't think that anybody thought that Desmond Bane, first of all, was available, number one, very similar to going back to the Tyrese Halliburton analogy I used earlier, but also taking it a step further, that the Orlando Magic would be the first of any team to make a move when at the time the biggest headline in the NBA was Kevin Durant, right? And him being moved and him going to a Houston or San Antonio being the first domino to fall before anything else kind of fell in place. And instead it was the Orlando Magic who set the trade tempo for that summer, which ended up not being nearly as crazy as people like ESPN Shams Charania made it seem like it was going to be, right? So the Orlando Magic are not above working behind the scenes to make a move that's unexpected. So I want you guys to take that in consideration that these players that are available, although the likelihood is that the Orlando Magic may not make a move at all this season, there is a chance that anything can happen, especially for an injury-riddled Orlando Magic team that came into this season with expectations to maybe make a move on the margins here or there to really shirt up their roster, where if they're going to be, an injured ball club, they're going to make the best out of their, top 8 rotation. So don't be surprised if the Orlando Magic do come up in these trade conversations. Do not be surprised if the Orlando Magic star players do get dangled around as potential suitors for other teams around the league, because the Orlando Magic are going to be vetting phone calls. That's, first of all, that's just part of an Orlando Magic, GM's job. That number one. Jeff Waltman would be a bad GM if he wasn't taking phone calls. First off, let's be clear. How fast he hangs up is a different different conversation, right? But as far as him actually taking phone calls, I mean that's a part of the gig. So again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth towards the end of the podcast, but just wanted to set the stage for the fact that any trade is very realistic for the Orlando Magic, because nearly every player that is in their main, 11-man rotation, 11 to 12-man rotation is trade eligible in one way or another now after December 15th. That was a very long subject. We are going to go to another potentially longer one, which is the first quarter report. I told you guys that I was going to do some deep diving as to some things that I thought were going to be really important, and although there wasn't as much feedback as I would have loved for it, I would appreciate, hearing from you guys in the comment section more often. I did do some of my due diligence as far as certain things that I want to discuss. So, the Orlando Magic, as of this moment, which is December 17th, they currently sit at 15-11 with the 14th highest scoring offense in the NBA, so about just above, average in the league, and the 8th best scoring defense in the NBA, along with being borderline within the top 10 in pace of play. They sit right outside of it at 11th. Offensive rating also borderline outside of the top 10 at 11th, and a top 5 defensive rating so far, netting them with a net rating of 9th in the NBA at plus 3.8. All very strong signs of a potential, not just postseason team, but a team that can make a run to the playoffs. They say the formula for make a run through the playoffs. They say the formula for a championship caliber team is to have a top 5 to top 10 offense, a top 5 to top 10 defense, an all-star to MVP caliber player, and a player next to them that complements them in a way, along with significant depth that can help fill out the roster in those situations where you have injuries or where you need somebody to have a big night on a night that one of their stars are off. The Orlando Magic have Paolo Banchero as an MVP caliber player. I would say that Franz Wagner also can count towards that, but you could also count him as the secondary player. They have a tertiary player as well in Desmond Bane, along with significant depth from improved guys like Anthony Black, Tristan Da Silva, Noah Pinda, Jonathan Isaac, so on and so forth. So, one of the things that I remember asking you guys was who is your quote unquote MVP through the first 25 to 26 games? Who is the player you are the most disappointed in so far throughout the season? And who is a player that surprised you the most so far this season? So, to go in order, the player that I believe has been the MVP of the first 26 games has been Desmond Bane. Yes, he had an inconsistent shooting start to kick off the season, but he has slowly but surely been able to revamp himself. He's one of the few Orlando Magic starting 5 players that has played in every single game so far this season, and that's huge. He's actually one of only 4 players on the Orlando Magic entirely that have played every single game so far this season. He's averaging 19 points, 4.6 assists, 4.5 rebounds, shooting nearly 50% from 2-point range, just over 35% on 3-point range. Would like to see those attempts shoot up. He said that he wanted to be around 8 to 9. Even 9 plus. He's only sitting at about 5 right now, so I'd like to see that go up. And he also is shooting 44.6% from the field. I think the biggest thing about him has been his consistency in playmaking. The most important thing that I think Desmond Bane has brought to the table more than anything so far this season is that although the 3 ball has not been falling, his ability to get to the paint and create offensive actions, whether it's dump offs, kickouts, or being able to create more efficient shots by simply getting paint touches, he has created a very important culture around this, more up-tempo pace of play that the Orlando Magic are playing with, by leaning into making sure that this team is getting downhill on a consistent basis, possession by possession, and at least getting a foot in the paint, even if a shot does not result from making that trip, right? So I'm very proud of what Desmond Bane has been able to bring to the roster so far this season. The most disappointing player is easily, for me, Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones usually has one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the NBA, and although he does not have a negative assist to turnover ratio so far this season, he has averaging 2 assists and just 0.3 turnovers. My biggest issue is that he's shooting less than 35% from the field, and he's shooting less than 29% from 3 on very limited attempts. So not only is he not really facilitating in a real way, by the way, only averaging about 14 minutes, wasn't expecting him to play heavy minutes here, but also wasn't expecting him to kind of be phased out of the rotation in a way where I think that guys like Jet Howard and I think eventually Jace Richardson as well are going to kind of usurp him in the rotation, right? So definitely the most disappointing, because I was, for those who have been rocking with the podcast from the very beginning, this has been the guy that I thought would be the most interesting as a guy that I think was feasible for the Orlando Magic to sign with the little bit of money they had. They had about anywhere between $7 million and about $12 million or so to be able to pick up somebody in free agency. They end up taking that money and essentially combining it to take Tyus Jones with the $7 million and $5 million towards bringing back Mo Wagner for the year. I pushed for him over guys like a Ty Jerome, who ended up going to Memphis, and I pushed for him for over a handful of other guys that I thought were maybe in the price range of $7 to $12 million. But I thought that Tyus Jones would be the best fit as like a veteran presence point guard that could facilitate, could get help run sets and be somebody that kind of helps more with this Orlando Magic team in the half court. And he just has not been that so far this season. The most surprising player to me so far this season, and this might actually come to a surprise to you guys, but it is Goga Batazde. And although the numbers may not might not scream to you, for those who know how I spoke about Goga Batazde during the summer, he was a player that I had very huge question marks about as far as being the backup center for this team long term, because he's an unrestricted free agent, not this upcoming summer, but the summer following, which makes him potentially expendable to a certain extent. And he's playing like a player that, when on the floor, I don't think if you're the Orlando Magic, you wouldn't want to move. He's very similar to how a lot of you guys, push for Jonathan Isaac to get more minutes. I genuinely believe that Goga Batase has been deserving of the minutes he's received, and honestly could play a little bit more in some more jumbo package lineups now with Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs likely to miss time as well, right? So I think that Goga Batase has played really, really well in his time on the floor. Again, I know the shooting splits are not necessarily great. He is shooting 73% from the field, not shooting nearly as well from three, but on low attempts. And I think that he's just been very good as far as activity. I think he's been very good at getting shots around the rim. I think that he's also been a really, really strong screen setter for this team so far this season, which I think has been really important for a team that's trying to lean more and more into pick and roll actions that really rely on the big man to get the ball on the low post in that roll action, as opposed to always leaning into a Paolo Banchero mid-range shot, or a Franz Wagner mid-range jumper, or in some semblances so far this season, even Desmond Bain operating downhill off of those actions. I think the fact that guys like Goga Batadze and Wendell Carter Jr. have been so much better this season at rolling to the rim off of these more aggressive hard set screens, it's really helped create for them. And something that I think is a little bit underrated is that although he's averaging only about 1.4 assists per game, I do love that Goga Batadze has been very good at moving the ball so far this season. He's been very good as being a play connector so far this year. Keeping the context, Goga Batadze is also averaging the fourth most rebounds of any player on the team so far, behind Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., and Franz Wagner. That's been huge as far as what this team has needed. And he's actually, I believe, second best, yes, as far as operating on the offensive glass at just near 2 offensive rebounds per game. For context, Wendell Carter Jr. is averaging nearly 3. So Goga Batadze has been very solid. Again, the stats may not scream to you that he's been this surprising player, but I think the Goga Batadze minutes have looked really good, and I think have carved out a space for him where, outside of the fact that his $8.3 million is very lucrative as far as team needy squads as that need, his $8.3 million contract is very lucrative for a team that is needy of a center, or needy of a center rotation, right? Whether it's needing to get a backup center, for some teams, maybe a starting center, right, for a cheaper price, right? So that 8.3 is very lucrative, but I think that what he's been able to do so far this season as the backup center, pretty much full time, because again, Jonathan Isaac is only playing 10.3 minutes per game. Agoga is playing nearly 17. Definitively speaking, I think that Goga Batadze has wrapped up that backup center position for the Orlando Magic so far this season, and I think he's done a really good job at it. You guys, again, let me know in the comment section down below who has been the most impressive player for you so far this season, who has been the most disappointing for you this season, and who has been the most surprising for you this season. They can be the same as the guys that I named, or they can be somebody else. It really all depends on what you view as over what you achieve, what you think they're doing as far as playing up to their potential, being consistent, as far as it being surprising. Did you have certain expectations for them coming into the season that they've played beneath? As far as being disappointing, you know, same thing. Did you have high expectations for them that they've underachieved on? For a surprising player, did you have low expectations for them and they've surprised you as far as playing a lot better than you expected? Things of that nature, right? So you guys let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about that. These next two sections should be a little bit faster. Next up is Magic versus Nuggets. The Magic are coming off of the NBA Cup loss to the New York Knicks, have been off for the last 4 days now, and are playing their first game against the Nuggets, who are within the top portion of the Western Conference and are riding a 5-game winning streak right now. Something notable that I wanted to point out is that when I was looking at the sports books breakdowns for this game, of course, the Orlando Magic are underdogs in the matchup without Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner likely to play in this game. Obviously, Franz is definitely not going to play Jalen, although the updates have been positive. There's a high likelihood he will also not play. A name that came up in these breakdowns was Jace Richardson. I would not be surprised if Jace Richardson plays a good amount of minutes starting with this game here against the Denver Nuggets. I would not be surprised if Jace Richardson even gets the start. But my projected starting lineup for this game is going to be, my personal projection is that I believe that this team is going to have to lean into essentially a bigger rotation, especially because I think that in this game, trying to make sure that I remember right, Aaron Gordon is not supposed to be active in this game. So, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Desmond Bane, already guaranteed. Those are the guaranteed three. Next to them, I believe that I believe genuinely that Anthony Black is going to still start. And I think that he's going to be the starting point guard next to Desmond Bane. And I think they're going to have a more jumbo style lineup where they have Jonathan Isaac either play the 4 or the 5. I think that they have to lean into a bigger lineup against this team. Like going up against a team led by Nikola Jokic, rim protection is going to be so important, especially when you do not have real strong real strong point of attack defenders right now. So I believe that the best way to be able to wall that off is by getting more minutes from Jonathan Isaac. I think the combination of Jonathan Isaac and Wendell Carter Jr. in the paint could be very useful. You're never going to stop Nikola Jokic, but you can slow him down at least and force him to be more of a facilitator, leaning on guys like now with Jamal Murray to have to create offense more independently. That's where you have guys like Anthony Black to be more serviceable that way. Off the bench, the lineup I want to see off the bench more than anything is Jet Howard, Jace Richardson, Tristan Da Silva, Noah Pinda, Goga Batazde. That is the lineup I want to see. I do not want to see Tyus Jones as much in this game. I would like to see those two guards with the floor spacing that they bring, the ball moving of Jet Howard, the on the ball creation of Jace Richardson, paired with Tristan Da Silva as a slasher and 3-point shooter, Goga Batazde as as a 4-man in this situation, right? Goga Batazde would be that backup 4. What did I say? Jace Richardson, Chet Howard, Tristan Da Silva, Goga Batazde. Oh, and Noah Pinda. Yes, I believe that Noah Pinda should also play. If I didn't say that beforehand, then I just want to reaffirm that. I think that I would love to see that 5-man group all together. I think they could operate really well in transition. I think that you have a lot of guys who can move the ball around at a high clip. You have 3 guys in Da Silva, Jace, and Jet Howard, who I think all provide real upside as 3-point shooters within that group as well. And you still have some level of size by having Noah Pinda and Goga Batazde on the floor operating your front court, right? Not to mention that you also have Tristan Da Silva as a natural 3-man. So that's what I would like to see. I think that Tristan Da Silva off the bench is the safest option with Anthony Black starting at that small forward position / point guard and bumping Paolo Banchero up. It's kind of depends on how you want to play it, but I mean you could have it in a multitude of different ways. But my projected starting lineup, if I have to look into the mind of Jamal Mosley and not in the mind of the guy who wants Jace Richardson to play so much more, I believe they're gonna have a starting lineup that has Desmond Bane, Anthony Black, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac. The me preference starting lineup would be Jace Richardson, Desmond Bain, Anthony Black, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter. That would be my personal preference. But what I think Jamal Mosley is going to do is going to lean towards size. He's going to lean towards having those two guards off the bench operate next to one another and have real defensive infrastructure behind them with guys like Da Silva, Penda, and Goga, right? At least from a size perspective. You guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about this matchup against the Denver Nuggets. This is going to be the first of what I believe is a 4-game road trip for the Orlando Magic as well. So that's going to be a really important thing to set the tone against yet again another team coming off that New York Knicks game, another team that's going to be in the mix for making it, a real, NBA championship run. Last but not least, this is more of a shorter segment because it's a question. Now, I mentioned to you guys beforehand that we are going to be referencing this NBA trade sheet very much because what I'm going to do is for the next, month, maybe 2 months, every episode we are going to have a player that we discuss on the Orlando Magic trade wish list. So what does this mean? The NBA essentially is going to have a full unleashing between now and January 15th of different rumors and names that are going to come out now that so many more guys have become trade eligible from this most recent 2025 free agency class. And with that being the case, there's going to be a lot of names, both big and small, that are going to circulate. And although, again, I do not believe that the Orlando Magic are going to be in the running for every single player that's discussed as a potential trade asset, I do believe that it would be interesting to have conversations about players who could be very valuable to the Orlando Magic if the Magic were able to put together a good enough trade package. So essentially, starting tomorrow, I'm going to give one name as kind of an anchor to start the series and get the comment section started. But starting tomorrow, we are going to discuss one player that I believe would be a dope fit for the Orlando Magic as a trade wish list player. Now, whether or not the Orlando Magic would truly pull the ripcord on this player is kind of out of the question. The point of the exercise is to identify players who are trade eligible, who would be interesting fits on the Orlando Magic if the Magic were able to put together a good enough package that wouldn't hurt their overall goal of making a run to the NBA championship this year, right? So, for example, we've had a conversation about James Harden on the podcast before, a name that I think would be very interesting on his salary at $25 million. If Giannis Antetokounmpo was moved, there's a likelihood that another person they may look to reflip is Miles Turner, who they acquired this summer via free agency after the Indiana Pacers folded on bringing him back. I think that Miles Turner, as much as you guys talk about the idea of, Wendell Carter Jr. not necessarily being enough, I think that actually Miles Turner could be a really interesting fit on this team as a true center, and you would only have to put, for $25 million, you would only have to move like Jonathan Isaac. You'd probably only have to move like Jonathan Isaac, Jet Howard, Tyus Jones, and that'd probably be enough right there because that puts you at about $28 million. He's at about 25. That would be enough where maybe if you get Miles Turner in a second, you move off of 2 expiring contracts that you now give Milwaukee, more cap flexibility by having some of those contracts fall off their roster. You do have a guy in Jet Howard who they may want to take a second draft look at. You have a veteran, a veteran leader in the locker room in Jonathan Isaac that you can exchange for, and you bring in, as the Orlando Magic, a guy like Miles Turner who can be a floor spacer, who can be a solid to at least above average rim protector, right? And that gives you somebody that now bumps Wendell Carter Jr. to the backup center position with Goga Batadze and him coming off the bench, or situations where Wendell Carter Jr. and Miles Turner could even play next to each other within the front court. And you have a ton of size. If you add Paolo Banchero at the 3, Franz Wagner back into the rotation, and you still have like an Anthony Black, or you go with Desmond Bain at the point guard position in that situation, right? So I think that, for example, although I don't necessarily know if they would move Miles Turner, I do think that if Giannis Antetokounmpo gets moved, Miles Turner is going to be in conversations to be reflipped because the main reason they made the acquisition of Miles Turner after flipping Damian Lillard essentially out to Portland, because that's essentially what they did. They saved themselves by biting the bullet on the money that they owed him to basically let him walk back to Portland, so that they could have the financial wherewithal to make the move to get Miles Turner. But without Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't know if they want Miles Turner. So Miles Turner could be somebody that definitely is in conversation to get flipped, and I think the Orlando Magic would be a dope fit for him, for example. So we're going to use this list as a baseline. In every single episode, I'm going to list a guy, I'm going to name a guy, that I think would be an interesting fit on the Orlando Magic. Not all of them are going to be star players. Not all of them are going to be owed, 20, 25 plus $1 million. Some may be, but some may be as simple as we talked about on the podcast. Dennis Schroeder, for example, would be a guy that I think would be interesting, who became trade eligible as of December 15th. That's owed about $14 million. All you would need to do is maybe move like Tyus Jones and Goga Batadze, and that gets you to about the 14 to $15 million to flip him from the Kings to the Orlando Magic and pair him up with his German brethren in Tristan da Silva, Franz Wagner, and Mo Wagner. Right, something very simple like that. So we're gonna kind of experiment with this, and we're gonna name a lot of interesting names that I think could be really really cool fits for this team. And again, are they all gonna necessarily be realistic? No, but could they all be really dope fits on the Orlando Magic if they were able to put together the right package for it? Yes, and I think that's something that could be really, really cool to kind of experiment with. So my first, real question for you guys, and again, I'm going to use Miles Turner as like my poster child to like start this conversation, is who is a player that you think would be a really dope fit on the Orlando Magic that if they could put the right trade package together, the Orlando Magic should have on their trade wish list slash like target board. Give me, anywhere between 1 to 3 names that you think would be really interesting. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what kind of trade packages could fit to be able to go after a player like that. And then more specifically, get into the weeds of how they would fit on this team and make sense of it. Because it's one thing to make a trade for a guy, it's another thing to make sense of how they're going to fit within the rotation, right? The same way I explained how I think that Miles Turner could be an interesting fit either ahead of or next to Wendell Carter Jr. in the front court, or a guy like Dennis Schroeder playing next to Mo Wagner, Franz Wagner, and Tristan da Silva. There are a handful of other really interesting players that I think could fit this Orlando Magic team, and some of them are actually a little bit more attainable than you think, because a lot of names that did become available are, $2 million to $5 million guys. So not every guy that we name is going to be a crazy out of this world trade package. It might just be a 1-for-1 swap with a second round pick attached. Something very simple. Or maybe just acquiring a guy for a handful of seconds. We've seen that with guys like PJ Tucker and Jay Crowder in the past. Could be something just as simple as that. So give me a name, maybe 3. That would be some interesting names that have become available as far as December 15th that you think the Orlando Magic should at least want to target as far as a trade wish list is concerned. With all that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Ladies podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Until then, peace.